Joining us now is Stephen Dreyfuss. He's a lawyer, former prosecutor, and former president of the International Association of Lawyers. Thanks so much for being with us.
Happy to be here.
So in his opinion, Justice Alito went out of his way to say that other rights, such as gay marriage and contraception, would not be next to be overturned. So why is there such concern that all of this won't stop with abortion rights?
Well, I think it comes from the test that he used in this draft opinion to overturn Roe versus Wade and the Casey opinion that followed it. The test that he used is that in order for us to imply a constitutional right from the right to due process under the Constitution that's guaranteed to every citizen, those rights have to be, quote, deeply rooted in this nation's history and traditions and implicit in the concept of ordered liberty. You can tell from listening to those formulas that beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and it may be very difficult to predict what 9 judges will say, or indeed 5 judges to form a majority will say are the rights that fall within that definition, and more importantly, those which do not.
What does all this say about precedent, though? I mean, this is something that's been on the books for, almost 5 decades.
That's right. And we do have in American law, as in English law, the principle of stare decisis, meaning the respect for precedent. And you may recall that when the Trump appointees to the Supreme Court were testifying before the Senate at their confirmation hearings, each one of them referred to Roe v. Wade and the subsequent cases as settled law,
right,
entitled to deference under stare decisis.
So what happened?
Well, what happened is that they now are on the court. They have a lifetime tenure, and they can do, I wouldn't say what they want, but what they can do what they believe is correct.
Were they being disingenuous when they said that?
Well, no one can go inside their head to know that, but certainly that issue is being raised. That being the case, the fact remains that in future cases, since we have a federal system, our system provides that the states have the right to regulate all sorts of things unless they are given to the federal government by the Constitution or unless the Constitution protects an individual's right against what the state might do. If this decision goes forward, the Constitution will no longer protect an individual woman's right to have an abortion, and the question will be expressly, according to Justice Alito, for the legislatures of the various states. Another issue that people fear is the possibility that if we have a Republican majority in the Congress and eventually another Republican president, there might be a federal law that will purport to criminalize or otherwise prohibit abortion in the entire country, notwithstanding the protections under state law. That's an open question which we haven't arrived at yet.
Given what you know about the court and your own experience as a lawyer, what do you think the chances are that the court will address these issues of gay marriage or contraception? How worried should people who support those rights be?
Well, they're going to be worried because those rights have only been relatively recently secured. But there will always be a lawsuit that will be brought by somebody either to invalidate or protect those rights. There will be decisions of the lower courts, and they will eventually make their way up into the appellate system, and only then will we find out the outcome for those rights.
Well, so the fact that this draft was leaked is really unprecedented, and I guess it's shown how politicized the court has become. Is that something that can really do damage to the reputation of the court?
Yes, I think the leak is appalling, and it's been considered that way from both sides of the spectrum. The more important issue, however, is whether the fact that this court has completely shifted with the 3 appointments made by President Trump and the refusal of the Republicans to consider the appointment made by President Obama at the end of his term, we really have 4 seats on the court out of the 9 that have shifted in that regard. And there is a question whether the court ought to be shifting so quickly upon a change in its personnel, or whether the respect for the institutional credibility of the court ought to be such among all the justices that they decline the opportunity, as Justice Alito took that opportunity, decline the opportunity to use their newfound majority immediately to overturn very well-settled precedent. And that's the issue that the Democrats are raising money on and basing their legislative campaign on for the midterm elections that will happen in November, to say to people, if you are concerned about this abortion or other rights, you ought to vote for Democrats so that this cannot happen in the future.
We should be clear that, justices can change their minds. This is a draft decision, but that doesn't seem quite likely that some of the justices would change their minds. Why is that?
Well, they have a great deal of pressure not to do so. There was a theory going around that this leak might have been orchestrated by the conservative side because Justice Kavanaugh was in discussions with Chief Justice Roberts to try to arrive at a middle way that would have validated the Mississippi law without overturning Roe v. Wade. And the concern was that by showing the light of day, showing that Kavanaugh had signed on to the draft opinion, he will have a disincentive to appear to be reacting to public pressure. The Chief Justice has said the court will not change its approach. It will be very difficult, because of this leak, it will be very difficult for a judge who was listed on the draft opinion to now come out the other way. However, remember, they are appointed for life exactly for this purpose, that they ought to make their decisions without fear, without favor, and without concern for public reaction. Whether they will do that remains to be seen.
And next time